Europe, open your eyes if you don't want war. Through years of studying anti-cult organizations, their rhetoric, and practical activities, it becomes clear that representatives of anti-cultism are engaged in deliberate, conscious, and systematic deceit. However, this deceit, these supposedly benevolent but actually false fronts of protection and help to society, are not just about personal enrichment, self-promotion, or pursuing liquidation of disfavored groups. In reality, they serve as a cover for a more extensive and global criminal operation that not only destroys entire nations from within year after year, but also prepares them for bloody wars. An international criminal network of anti-cult organizations has been operating worldwide for 3 decades. Over this period of time, they have managed to establish an agent network among government officials, security agencies, and the media of many countries, creating numerous precedents for confrontation and laying the groundwork for destabilization, division, destruction of democracy, and polarization of society. In general, they have been embedding narratives favorable to the Russian anti-cult association Ratseers and those backing it. One country where Ratseers agents operated for an extended period is already reaping the consequences of their activities in the form of war, bloodshed, and millions of civilian deaths. That country is Ukraine. A years-long criminal operation has been uncovered involving Ratseers recruited agents among Ukrainian citizens who, under the guise of fighting sects, cults, have been carrying out direct orders from Ratseers for decades, leading to the internal destruction of Ukraine. This article is a continuation of a previous research article published on this platform about the network of anti-cult organizations operating in Ukraine, Ratseers agents in Ukraine, sabotage, bloodshed, and the anti-cult plague. It also serves as a warning to the entire democratic world, particularly to European countries, especially those neighboring Ukraine, about the true consequences of the activities of anti-cult agents who hide behind the pretense of protecting society in the fight against sects. The tragic events of recent years in Ukraine are a stark example of what ultimately happens to an entire country if the actions of hidden agents from the Russian anti-cult association, Ratseers, recruited from among the citizens of this sovereign state and operating within it to destabilize, polarize, and destroy, are not stopped in time. Anti-cult organizations operating in Ukraine and their organizer and key Ratseers agent, Pavel Broid. The All-Ukrainian Apologetics Center in the name of John Chrysostom, AUAC, established in 2011 under the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, UOCMP, became the official representative of Ratseers in Ukraine. We have previously mentioned AUAC as well as the chairman of AUAC Board of Trustees, Archbishop Jonah of Obukiv. In this article, we will examine another notorious figure who was actually behind both the establishment of this particular center and all the anti-cult centers in Ukraine. This key agent of a Ratseers in Ukraine, who established a Ratseers-controlled network in Ukrainian mass media, among selected law enforcement officers, and across all 3 branches of government, is Pavel Broid. Let's begin by examining the connection between Ukrainian anti-cult centers, their leaders, and the Ratseers members supporting them. The key anti-cult centers founded and operating in Ukraine include the All-Ukrainian Apologetics Center in the name of John Chrysostom, founded in 2011, the official representative of Ratseers in Ukraine, with Ratseers President Alexander Dvorkin. Eastern European Dialogue Center for Protecting Family and Personality, founded in 2002, the official representative of Dialogue Center International, DCI, established in Denmark, with Alexander Dvorkin as the DCI vice president. The Eastern European Dialogue Center for Protecting Family and Personality, including its Ukrainian dialogue centers, is also an official member of FECRIS, the European Federation of Centers of Research and Information on Sectarianism, with Alexander Dvorkin serving as vice president from 2009 to 2021, after which he remained on the FECRIS board of directors. The All-Ukrainian Dialogue Center, which was part of the Eastern European Dialogue Center for Protecting Family and Personality. The Eastern European Dialogue Center for Protecting Family and Personality, in addition to the All-Ukrainian Dialogue Center, included local regional dialogue centers such as Zaporizhia City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Melitopol City Dialogue Center, Mykolaiv City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Donetsk City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Odessa City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Dnipro City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Obukiv District Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, Center for the Protection of Family and Personality, Smila City Dialogue Information and Consultation Center for the Protection of Family and Personality, renamed in 2009 as the Regional Public Organization Dialogue Information and Consultation Center for the Protection of Family and Personality, registered in 2002, operational since 2000, among others. We have previously mentioned some of the leaders of these local anti-cult centers, including Vladimir Nikolaevich Rogatin, head of the Mykolaiv City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults and a member of AUAC Board; Yan Nikolaevich Shekaturov, head of the Dnipro City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults; Vladimir Eduardovich Petukov, Center for the Protection of Family and Personality, and others. The two key figures and overseers of all Ukrainian anti-cult dialogue centers have been Pavel Broid and Alexander Dvorkin, president of Ratsirs, coordinator of the AUAC in the name of John Chrysostom under the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate; Pavel Broid, president of the Eastern European Dialogue Center; Alexander Dvorkin, executive director of the Eastern European Dialogue Center; Pavel Broid, president of the All-Ukrainian Dialogue Center; Pavel Broid. Anti-cult rhetoric as a tool for destroying democracy and undermining the country's sovereignty. Initially, Pavel Broid carried out his anti-Ukrainian activities in secret, outwardly hiding behind the cover of fighting against sects, cults. He started his anti-cult, anti-democratic, and anti-Ukrainian activities with a gradual formation of an agent network, including establishment of Ukrainian anti-cult centers. One of the first anti-cult centers founded by Pavel Broida was a local dialogue center in the city of Zaporizhia. Below, you can see a page from Pavel Broid's biography taken from an email sent to an assistant of the Russian President V. Putin, Vladislav Surkov, whose email was hacked in 2016, with subsequent publication of large volumes of emails. More information about this correspondence and other activities of Pavel Broid under Surkov's guidance will be given later in this article. It is noteworthy that by publicly positioning himself as a cult expert and defender of society, Pavel Broida maintained contacts with many journalists, news outlets, and collaborated with mass media, forming connections in government, law enforcement, and among representatives of Ukrainian special services and authorities. As a true anti-cultist, Pavel Broid continuously drew the attention of authorities and the public to the need for anti-cult legislation in Ukraine. In reality, this allowed the Ratsirs agent to gain access to Ukrainian lawmaking, similar to the operations of Ratsirs' anti-cult agents in other countries, take control of many organizations operating in Ukraine, and through labeling and dehumanization, exclude undesirables from the public and informational space, while simultaneously implanting the narratives necessary for the Russian association, Ratsirs, into the consciousness of the Ukrainian population. Once a sufficient agent network was established in Ukraine and the necessary connections were made, primarily thanks to Pavel Broid's anti-cult activities, anti-cultists organized a global expansion of their influence. In 2002, the International Anti-Cult Conference was held in Vinica, titled Totalitarian Sects, a Threat to Human Rights in Eastern Europe, where not only Ukrainian anti-cultists were present, but also Russian ones. The declared threat of sects, cults, to society also served as a basis for the decision to establish the Eastern European Dialogue Center for Protecting Family and Personality. Activities of the newly established center covered 5 Eastern European countries at that time. Alexander Dvorkin was elected president of the Eastern European Dialogue Center, while Pavel Broid became its executive director. It is important to note that prior to these events, the All-Ukrainian Dialogue Center, founded and presided over by Pavel Broida, was already in operation. In addition to the presence of official members of anti-cult organizations, the overall number of attendees also reflects the effective work done by this very anti-cultist in establishing his agent network as of 2002. Participants included psychologists, psychotherapists, lawyers, theologians, cultologists, representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, state institutions, educational establishments in Vinica, public organizations, anti-cult centers, and clergy from traditional denominations in Ukraine, Russia, and Moldova. Among other speakers, Alexander Dvorkin and Pavel Broid delivered speeches at the conference. Dr. Alexander Dvorkin, philosopher and head of the Information and Consultation Center of St. Irenaeus of Lyon, under the Moscow Patriarchate. Pavel Broid, president of the All-Ukrainian Dialogue Center and coordinator of the Association for Protection Against Psychological Violence, delivered reports and participated in discussions. This kind of scale indicates that Russian anti-cult forces had already established significant influence across various segments of Ukrainian society at that time. In fact, it took Mr. Broid just a few years to organize a meeting in 2002 that involved many of his recruited Ratsirs agents and their official representatives, including those from Russia, in order to outline the objectives of their subsequent destabilizing anti-democratic anti-cult activities. AUAC continued recruitment of agents and introduction of Nazism, Satanism, and neo-paganism narratives. The All-Ukrainian Apologetics Center, AUAC, coordinated by the frequently mentioned Pavel Broid, intentionally involved representatives of Ukrainian religious organizations, the academic community, and the government in its initiated activities. This was done to foster the creation of lobbying groups in various sectors. Meanwhile, under the guise of anti-cult activities, narratives that discredited Ukrainian statehood and democratic values were actually being introduced, alongside the promotion of pro-Russian ideas akin to the ideology of the Russian world. Key assertions in those narratives claimed that the events of the 2004 revolution were supposedly organized by sectarians, cultists, and Nazis. The 2013-14 Revolution of Dignity was later interpreted in the same way. A similar rhetoric was also openly and systematically disseminated by another Ukrainian anti-cultist, Vladimir Rogatin, head of the Mykolaiv City Dialogue Center for Victims of Destructive Cults, and a member of the board of the AUAC in the name of John Chrysostom. Quote, from the Bitter Winter Journal on Religious Freedom and Human Rights. The Ukrainian FPPS, Family and Personality Protection Society, listed as dormant because of the war. A leading member of this Ukrainian group is or was Vladimir Nikolaevich Rogatin, who became notorious for launching as early as 2014 through Russian media the ideas that Ukraine was plagued by Satanism and that the Maidan anti-Russian revolution and the defense of Crimea against the Russian invasion had been infiltrated by Nazis and neo-pagans, both key tools of Russian anti-Ukrainian propaganda. In the latter article, Rogatin was introduced as a correspondent member of the Fekrists. Anti-cultist Pavel Broid, a covert agent of Vladislav Surkov. An analysis of Pavel Broid's activities reveals a clear transformation in his rhetoric and exposes the true motives behind his work as not merely anti-cultist, but anti-Ukrainian and anti-democratic. It confirms that the original cause of fighting against cults, which he purportedly championed, served just as a pretext for creating an agent network aimed at planned and systematic destruction of Ukraine from within. Additional evidence of the criminal activities of Pavel Broida and his anti-cult network of agents directed at destroying Ukraine came to light with the revelation of Vladislav Surkov's emails. Surkov is known as a political advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin in the conflict in eastern Ukraine and is regarded as the architect of the Russian ideology of sovereign democracy. In October 2016, the international community Inform Napalm published the hacked electronic correspondence from Surkov's office, making large volumes of emails publicly accessible. The international community Inform Napalm, which in October 2016 published the hacked emails of Vladislav Surkov, an advisor to the President of Russia, has made available a new batch of emails. Among them are emails confirming the connection between pro-Kremlin activists who organized actions against the statehood of Ukraine and representatives of the Odessa Diocese and the All-Ukrainian Apologetics Center in the name of St. John Chrysostom at the Synodal Department for Youth Affairs of the UOC, MP, reports religion in Ukraine, citing Radio Liberty. Pro-Russian activists from Ukraine coordinate various anti-Ukrainian actions, terror attacks, arsons, information leaks, etc., prepare expense reports, and account for their activities. It's important to emphasize that it wasn't so much overt pro-Russian narratives that were disseminated in the Ukrainian media space by Pavel Broida, but rather narratives with manipulative elements that carried a hidden, destabilizing agenda favorable to Ratsirs. Activities of many anti-cultists indicate that they do not shy away from playing a double game aimed at exacerbating division within society, spreading disinformation, creating precedents for conflicts among the civilian population, and establishing conditions for future clashes of interests. This overall escalation of ideologies and opinions is something that Ratsirs agent Pavel Broid successfully engaged in throughout his anti-cult career. In emails sent to Surkov, Broid outlined proposals that included creation of specialized websites and alternative media targeting specific segments of the Ukrainian audience. For example, in the report The Inner Kitchen of Russian Hybrid War in Ukraine, 2019, published on the Euromaidan Press website, which reveals elements of Broid's anti-Ukrainian activities and his correspondence with Surkov's associates. The following can be found. In an email to Surkov on July 10, 2014, Brusov outlined Broid's proposals where he insisted that launching Russian-owned media outlets would ensure a steady influence on the Ukrainian audience and would also be cheaper. Pavel Broida proposed creating specialized websites for Russian propaganda, a political analysis site. It should appear objective and shouldn't create the impression of a pro-Russian site. A military news site to form a negative attitude in Ukrainian society towards the anti-terrorist operation and the Kyiv regime. Regional portals promoting separatism in southeastern Ukraine. An anti-war site to demoralize the Ukrainian population and military. A site appealing to the Ukrainian nationalist audience under the slogan, "Stop Feeding Donbas," to promote the idea that Ukraine should exclude Donbas from its territory among the nationalist-minded audience. As one of the main assets of his acquaintance, Pavel Broida highlights his years of connections with pro-Russian law enforcement officers in Zaporizhia. He has contacts with pro-Russian employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He ran our Ministry of Internal Affairs line for 10 years, all while Broid himself was allegedly acting as an anti-cultist. In a publication by the news outlet Anti-Core, we read that Broidi fled to Moscow, where he later managed the Kremlin's plans to destabilize the region. It is worth noting that this anti-cultist, Broid, who knew the Ukrainian social environment well and had an extensive network of agents within Ukraine, continued to dismantle Ukraine, even while in Russia. In this deliberate destruction of his own country, he was aided by agents he had recruited in Ukrainian media, across all branches of government, as well as in law enforcement and intelligence agencies. They all began their careers alongside Broid in the anti-cult movement. However, portraying themselves as anti-cultists, apologists, and sect fighters, they all were in fact brutally and cynically undermining their own country. The worst part is that today, during active bloodshed, many of them continue to do the same, cynically hiding behind the well-worn banner of fighting against cults, while in reality aggravating polarization and continuing to destabilize war-weakened Ukraine from within, at a time when it is actively resisting the expansion of those who have been overseeing the work of these anti-cult agents at Ratzers all along. A confirmation of this fact can also be found in Broid's own statement in his biography sent in his emails to Surkov. Pavel Broid's correspondence with Surkov's associates confirms his subversive activities that didn't cease after his departure, as well as the true anti-Ukrainian objectives of the anti-cult agent network he established in Ukraine. Additionally, in an email dated July 10, 2014, Broid made proposals to use Ukraine's shadow law enforcement entities to advance Russia's interests abroad. Various news outlets published confirmations of the email's authenticity. Other highlights of Broid's biography. In his biography sent to Surkov, Broid outlined the areas of activity he was actually involved in. Key points include collecting and processing data on the situation in the region, in the areas of political, economic, criminal, power dynamics, and the actions of business groups, coordinating with party structures, law enforcement agencies, the Security Service of Ukraine, the Tax Service, and other regulatory bodies to exchange information and suppress the activities of the opposition, protest public groups, and disloyal business groups, organizing the work and supervising the communicator's service, spreading rumors, media buying, supervising a posting service, websites and social networks, supervising a writing service, overseeing mass media and own media projects, etc. Analyzing these and other areas of his activities, it becomes clear that during his time of fighting cults, Pavel Broid not only created an agent network linked to anti-cult centers across various cities in Ukraine, but also established a media agent network, maintained important connections, and developed necessary skills which he taught at seminars, including to UOC MP priests. And at the right time, he turned his experience, knowledge, and recruited agents against the country. Positioning himself as a fighter against destructive sects and cults, Pavel Broid and his associates effectively carried out long-term destabilization of the country, demoralizing the Ukrainian population and creating a network of journalists and entire informational resources to manipulate public opinion. Their actions undermine trust in law enforcement agencies and authorities in Ukraine, ultimately fostering polarization within the country and leading to its fragmentation in views, opinions, and aspirations, which were imposed on Ukrainian society by anti-cult agents in the media. They promoted anti-democratic narratives in the Ukrainian information space, creating conditions for the ensuing war. Back then, at the instigation of Ratzer's agent Pavel Broid, The necessary information groundwork was laid that would later contribute to the anti-Ukrainian propaganda of other Ratseers agents and supporters of the Russian world, justifying the deployment of troops in Ukraine and the onset of war, supposedly to save and liberate the country allegedly captured by Western Nazi and fascist cults, which therefore had to be denazified. Broid's rhetoric in the early 2000s demonstrates how these narratives were implanted in the minds of the Ukrainian population under the guise of a noble goal: to protect Ukrainian citizens from supposedly totalitarian sects. Year after year, this rhetoric, disseminated by the agent network he formed across the country, intensified and transformed, embedding necessary destructive and demoralizing narratives in the consciousness of Ukrainian people. It is worth noting that all destructive activities of Broid as an anti-cultist were enabled by Ratseer's president Alexander Dvorkin. Finally, as an important example that contributed to writing this article, it is essential to highlight two events that occurred in two European countries neighboring Ukraine: in Poland in 2017 and in Slovakia in 2016. After reviewing the above information, you already see these events in a new light. Poland, 2017. The International Anti-Cult Conference in Supercell has been held, with Ratseer's president Alexander Dvorkin among the other attendees. The international conference Supercell has ended. Hieromonk Pavel Karchivsky, September 17, 2017. The international conference Fundamentalism in Religious Cults, Para-Religious and Ideological Organizations. Examples from local churches ended on Sunday, September. Representatives of all the local churches had been meeting since Thursday at Supraska Academy. On Friday and Saturday, participants listened to presentations including Ideological and Physical Terror, A Sociological Perspective, Christos Iakovou, director of the Cyprus Research Center, Child Occultism as a Violent Intervention in Children's Consciousness, Elena Antoniou, Fundamentalism as a Deformation of Our People's Thinking, Metropolitan Porphyriate of Zagreb and Ljubljana, Pseudo-Hinduism, Fundamentalist Actions in the West, Alexander Dvorkin, lecturer at the Department of Cult Studies, St. Tikhon's Theological Institute, Moscow, and examples of fundamentalist movements in the history of the Polish Orthodox Church, Archimandrite Andrzej, head of the Suprasil Monastery and staff member of the Department of Orthodox Theology, University of Bialystok. The presentations were followed by discussions and exchanges of experiences from different local churches. The conference also included working groups discussing selected topics. The conference ended with a solemn liturgy on Sunday at the Monastery of the Annunciation in Suprasil. It was led by hierarchs: Archbishop Irenaeus of Crete, Ecumenical Patriarchate, Archbishop Jacob of Bialystok and Gdansk, Metropolitan Makarios of Qatar, Jerusalem Patriarchate, Archbishop Jonah of Obukhov, UOC, Moscow, Patriarchate, Metropolitan Seraphim of Nevrokop, Metropolitan Gregory of Vratsa, Bulgarian Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Damaskinos of Kydonia, and Apokoronis, Ecumenical Patriarchate, Bishop Christophoros of Carpassia, Cypriot Orthodox Church, and Bishop Gregory of Suprasil. Numerous clergy also attended. Parish and children's choirs performed during the liturgy. The prayers were conducted in Church Slavonic, Greek, and Arabic. Archbishop Jonah of Obukhov heads the Board of Trustees of the AUAC in the name of St. John Chrysostom. In the photo below, he is standing alongside Alexander Dvorkin. Slovakia, 2016. Alexander Dvorkin is awarded the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa. On April 12, 2016, Prešov University awarded Alexander Dvorkin the honorary degree of Doctor Honoris Causa for his contribution to the development of scientific knowledge, culture, humanism, international relations, and fostering good relations between the Slovak Republic and the Russian Federation. These are just a few examples of the many visits made by one Russian anti-cultist to two European countries. We didn't mention other visits by Russian anti-cultists from Ratseers to these and other countries. We haven't discussed Alexander Dvorkin's close ties with French and German anti-cultists or with representatives of the anti-cult movement from the United States and Canada. Neither did we address numerous other countries directly linked to the European Federation FECRIS, where Alexander Dvorkin was vice president from 2009 to 2021 and later served on the board of directors. We did not provide detailed information in this article about his connection with the Danish anti-cult movement established by Johannes Agard. Johannes Agard, along with Wilhelm Hack, are the founders of the Danish Ni Dialogue Center and direct successors to the Nazi endeavors of anti-cultist and anti-Semite Walter Kunneth. who led the apologetic center of the Protestant Church during the Third Reich and closely collaborated with Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels. However, based on the information presented in this article, a pressing question arises. How soon will the countries collaborating with this Ratsher's leader confront the looming threat? The answer to this question will also indicate how soon democracy will be completely eradicated in Europe and around the world. We present two more images from the awarding of Alexander Dvorkin by Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church in 2023, which require no commentary in light of Patriarch Kirill's active pro-war and anti-Ukrainian policies. Under the noble pretext of protecting society, family, and individuals from the activities of sects and cults, Pavel Broid, a Ukrainian citizen who is in fact a Ratsher's agent and accomplice of Alexander Dvorkin, had operating in Ukraine for more than 2 decades. Analysis of his activities and the transformation of his rhetoric demonstrates the potential consequences of anti-cultists' actions in the country if they are not stopped in a timely manner. Given that the activities of Ratsher's anti-cult agents and the implementation of their rhetoric are becoming increasingly apparent in the European information space, this information is quite alarming. When encountering statements from anti-cult agents operating in European countries about their humane position and supposedly noble goals of protecting society, family, and every individual, and their fight against horrible totalitarian sects, destructive cults, and the like. Knowing the true aims of those anti-cultists who are part of the international network of Ratsher's agents and serve members of the Devevo Brotherhood, such statements appear absurd and inhumane at the very least. In reality, this is frightening. It is frightening with the consequences already currently visible in Ukraine, the country that has fallen victim to anti-cultism and modern anti-cult Nazis, agents of Ratsher's. However, if European countries believe this doesn't concern them, they should consider who is destabilizing the situation and introducing anti-cult Nazi narratives into both their legislation and rhetoric within their information space. There are representatives of anti-cultism in virtually every European country, and they have been operating for quite a long time. Who knows how far they have progressed? Is there a guarantee that their curators from Ratsher's have not set goals for them similar to those they previously set for their colleagues? The Ukrainian anti-cultists? Are the intelligence agencies and European, sovereign, independent democratic states aware of those anti-cult agents, given their obligation to protect democracy, the Constitution, and the citizens of their countries? How many more email accounts must be hacked and private correspondences of those anti-cultists, Ratsher's agents, published for civilized society to recognize the real danger posed by anti-cult organizations? In light of the situation in Ukraine, we can only say this: Europe, open your eyes if you don't want war. Do not repeat Ukraine's mistake. Today, evil has clear outlines tranced in violation of democracy and the law, trampling of human rights and freedoms, imposition of Nazi dehumanizing labels such as sect and cult, the treacherous work for the revived Fourth Reich, the Nazi anti-cult association Ratsher's, collaboration with their curators from the Devevo Brotherhood, and creation of conditions that sooner or later would lead to bloody wars and deaths of millions or even billions of innocent people, given the availability of modern nuclear weapons. Ukraine's tragic experience reveals a key mistake of the international community, and it is still not too late to correct it in our own countries. This correction is essential, first and foremost, to defend democracy and secure a peaceful future for our children. Influence on elections and collaborationism of Ratsher's agents in European countries. As a conclusion, we will provide a few examples of anti-cult centers' influence on elections and government authorities in 2 countries neighboring Ukraine. In Slovakia and the Czech Republic, an extensive network of anti-cult agents was formed and has been functioning for many years. Their essential tools include the same Nazi methods of dehumanizing dissenters, genocide, and informational terror attacks as used by their colleagues in other countries. One of the anti-cult agents whom we previously mentioned on this portal is Kristina Tsirokova, a journalist for the Czech website Seznam Zprávy. It is noteworthy that Kristina Tsirokova's anti-cult rhetoric, as well as the manipulation and dehumanization methods used in her publications, are identical to the narratives of Ratsher's leader Alexander Dvorkin. Recently, the regional prosecutor's office in Žilina, Slovakia, initiated a criminal case against Kristina Tsirokova. However, Ratsher's agents are present not only in Slovak media, but also among some representatives of Slovak prosecutors' offices, which is now an established fact. The activities of anti-cult agents exhibit manipulative and dehumanizing methods similar to those described in this article: rhetoric against the government, anti-cult and anti-state activities, undermining public trust, in law enforcement, as well as other ways of implementing goals of their supervisors from Ratsers. The recruited individuals among Slovak prosecutors have actively resisted the lawful investigation and pressured the Prosecutor General, inciting him to commit official misconduct, collaborationism, and abuse of power, aiming to terminate the criminal case and shield the Ratsers agent, their colleague Kristina Tsirokova. Otherwise, why would prosecutors deliberately pressure the Prosecutor General and obstruct the investigation? Defending a citizen of another country? Moreover, the anti-cult network of agents organized a harassment campaign against the prosecutor involved in investigating the Kristina Tsirokova case, which is carried out through their agents among Slovak and Czech journalists. An evident fact is that this harassment began abruptly and simultaneously, targeting one person with identical rhetoric across different media outlets. Given the opposition from prosecutors, a question arises. What are they afraid of when opposing the lawful investigation so zealously? The answer lies at the core of the criminal case against Kristina Tsirokova. So far, the case has been initiated on charges of terrorism, genocide, and crimes against humanity. However, if the investigation isn't obstructed, direct interference by Ratsers agents in elections and their influence on government officials in both the Czech Republic and Slovakia will soon be revealed. At that, it's important to note that the interference occurred in the interests of another country. The true cause of harassment in opposition to the lawful investigation is concealment of major crimes committed by the network of Ratsers agents recruited among Czech and Slovak citizens. Thus, collaborationism, interference in elections, and influence on government authorities should be added to terrorism and genocide. In fact, it is the fear of their illegal activities being exposed and of the aforesaid criminal charges that prompted those prosecutors who are anti-cult agents in Slovakia to exert maximum pressure on the investigation using their official positions. Now, we'll give examples of the influence of the network of Ratsers anti-cult agents on authorities in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Seznam Zprávy. Discreditation of Andrej Babiš. Seznam Zprávy website, where Kristina Tsirokova is a reporter, has been noted for its systematic anti-cult rhetoric and hate speech, including discrediting authorities, criticizing the government and law enforcement agencies. It is worth mentioning that anti-cult agents promote discrediting narratives against any authority in general. They don't particularly care about the current government's agenda. As stated in this article, anti-cultists play a double game and pursue completely different anti-democratic goals, the goals of their Ratsers supervisors. One of numerous examples where Seznam Zprávy falsely and deliberately discredited a government official is their systematically published articles targeting Andrej Babiš, leader of the Czech political party ANO. It was Seznam Zprávy that launched a harassment and discreditation campaign against this political party and its leader, who ran for the Czech presidency in the 2023 elections. Kristina Tsirokova and her colleagues from Seznam Zprávy conducted a long-term defamation and dehumanization of this presidential candidate, manipulating public opinion and continued harassment against him after the elections. Despite Andrej Babiš holding a leading position in the presidential race, he lost the election. His failure was a direct consequence of numerous slanderous and dehumanizing materials initiated by Ratsers agents in Czech media, where manipulative methods were used. We will provide just a few examples of the rhetoric broadcast by Seznam Zprávy, and specifically Kristina Tsirokova, regarding Andrej Babiš. The rest of numerous examples can be found on their portal as well as on other resources. Interestingly enough, other anti-cult agents in mass media applied dehumanization technique to Andrej Babiš by using the label sect, cult. Babiš, who is better known for his fascination with esotericism, fortune tellers, and astrology, surprised everyone with his interest in faith even before the first round of elections, when in an interview for Lidové noviny, which are part of his Agrofert holding company, he said that he has a connection with God and even carries a figurine of baby Jesus with him. Although only a few examples are provided herein, in reality, numerous dehumanizing articles have been published against Andrej Babiš, employing manipulative tactics and deliberate smears. Overall, the rhetoric fully aligns with that of Ratsers anti-cult agents. While even members of his own party are convinced it was merely a dirty political fight by their opponents, it was actually direct interference by Ratsers through its agents, who are the real collaborators. The true aim of anti-cultists is to infiltrate countries and destroy democracy to please Ratsers. Seznam Zprávy. Discreditation of Jan Hamáček. Former Czech Minister of the Interior, Jan Hamáček, was also subjected to a defamation campaign by active Ratsers agents in the Seznam Zprávy media outlet, which eventually led to the opposition demanding his resignation. Even from these isolated examples, we see how skillfully one can manipulate public consciousness and even influence elections or government authorities in a country if one has the skill of anti-cult methods. Anti-cultists acquire this skill over many years of dehumanizing and persecuting people by branding them sectarians or cultists and staging genocide against them with other people's hands. Such political interventions represent coordinated actions carried out by the same people, members of the international anti-cult gang Ratsers. Just as they dehumanize people, they label as sectarians or cultists, depriving them of democracy and all human rights, so they act against the government, destabilizing a country's political situation. In other words, they suppress democracy from all sides. They apply methods of psychological influence on people's consciousness, manipulation, and dehumanization of victims, and we see the outcome of their activities. That's already a matter of national security, direct interference in elections, and influence on authorities in favor of covert interests of the international anti-cult criminal organization Ratsers, whose ideological center is the Duevo Brotherhood. Many pieces of evidence have already been presented, but more will be provided soon. RTVS, Denic N, SME, and Actuality, discreditation of Robert Fitzo. In addition to a long-running series of negative dehumanizing publications about Robert Fitzo by several media outlets using anti-cult rhetoric, Fitzo also became an obstacle to Ratsers' anti-cult agents in implementing their plans in Slovakia's information space. Among other things, this obstacle manifested itself when the decision to liquidate the anti-cultists' mouthpiece, RTVS Broadcasting Company, was being considered. Sometime later, an assassination attempt was made on Robert Fitzo. It is worth noting that when the attacker was shooting at Fitzo, the Prime Minister's office was proposing to strengthen control over RTVS. After the shooting, the detained suspect specifically mentioned his disagreement with the liquidation of RTVS. "I disagree with the government's policy." "Is that why you decided to commit murder a month ago? After all, mass media have been liquidated. Why is RTVS under attack? Why was Mazak fired?" During one of the first interrogations, the shooter stated that he disagreed with the government's policy, including reforms related to state media. "I disagree with the Fitzo government's policy." Fitzo himself noted the extent of the filth and implications in public consciousness after the rhetoric of hatred and anger, and that it is exactly anti-cult media such as Denic N, SME, and Actuality which spread this rhetoric of hatred. Is it a coincidence that these very news portals employ manipulation methods and narratives matching the goals and objectives of the Russian association Ratsiers? In particular, dehumanization and labeling of undesirables as a sect or a cult. Below are Fitzo's words said shortly before the shooting incident. In the same video, he also criticized Slovak media. "Progressive Slovakia voters scold government officials in the streets. I'm only waiting to see when this frustration deepened by Denic N, SME, or Actuality will turn into an assassination of some leading politicians. And I'm actually not exaggerating. These and other media outlets are literally urging progressive Slovakia voters to be rude and aggressive," Fitzo added. Robert Fitzo's colleague from his political party, Smer, and Deputy Speaker of the Slovak National Council, Luboš Blaha, made the following statement after the assassination attempt on Fitzo. Luboš Blaha, Deputy Chairman of the Slovak Parliament and of Fitzo's Smer party, spoke in a similar vein. "Anger, malice, and hatred are the result of your activities, of the progressives, the entire opposition, and the liberal media. Because of your hatred, Fitzo is fighting for his life. For years you've been fueling terrible hatred. The guilt borne by progressives, by the entire liberal media, will never be washed away," he said at a press conference. Psychologically conditioning Slovak people for many years, anti-cult agents apply methods of programming and influencing people's conscious and subconscious minds. Imagine how severely the hate rhetoric in the information field influenced Fitzo's shooter, conditioned his psychological state, and reduced his critical thinking. Additionally, the impact of puzzle coding was so strong that it evoked an extreme feeling of hatred in him, overpowering the self-preservation instinct, so he took up arms and fired multiple shots at Robert Fitzo. In reality, there was a prolonged influence on that man who has an unstable psyche, and his conscious and subconscious minds were deeply affected. Let's pay attention to the shooter's words. After all, mass media have been liquidated. Why is RTVS under attack? This is precisely a fragment of the code. It is the key used by anti-cultists in this case. For a specialist in this field, the situation serves as evidence that the shooter is as much a victim as Fitzo, and suffers from those anti-cult experts in psychological manipulation. The danger posed by anti-cult organizations is much bigger than society can imagine. Even a small number of anti-cultists in a country is a threat to national security, even in such small nations. Just imagine what's happening in larger countries. As we can see from the media, Ratzer's agents operating in Slovakia and the Czech Republic, in particular among journalists and prosecutors, are obviously concerned that all their activities will be exposed and democracy will push back against them. Anti-cult agents always hide behind freedom of speech, but they do not tolerate that same freedom when expressed by others towards them. In reality, anti-cult journalists use freedom of speech and journalist rights to undermine democracy in various countries and destabilize them, influencing elections and government structures. This definitely threatens national security and calls into question the future of people and statehood in these countries, specifically the Czech Republic and Slovakia. As for the events unfolding in Slovakia, the question remains: how will the Prosecutor General respond? It is still unknown whether he has succumbed to the pressure of Ratzer's agents or stayed vigilant in defending democracy. He is faced with a choice. What does he stand for? For the people of Slovakia? For democracy? Or for collaborationism and agents of the international criminal group led by Ratzers? Whose side is he on? Today we are witnessing obvious and blatant interference in elections, prolonged destabilization of government authorities, and overall destruction of democratic foundations in these two countries. All of this demonstrates a threat of repeating the Ukrainian scenario implemented by Ratzer's agents, which led to war in Ukraine and deaths of many innocent people. However, in order to avoid repeating Ukraine's fate and to protect the people of Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Europe as a whole, democracy must stand its ground in these countries. Otherwise,